All the Money in the World is directed by Ridley Scott and stars Christopher Plummer as J. Paul Getty, who at a point in time was the richest man in the history of the world, and this was a well-known fact. This made the Getty family a target, as his grandson J. Paul Getty III is kidnapped in Rome, and the kidnappers are asking for $17 million in ransom. But Getty is not the most compliant to these terms, which creates some big problems for the kid's mother and Getty's expert negotiator, Fletcher Chase. First things first, I think we need to address the very obvious elephant in the room, which is the whole Kevin Spacey situation. If you do not know, Kevin Spacey was originally cast in the lead role and completed all the scenes he needed to film. However, due to the allegations that were put against him, he was removed from the film and replaced by Christopher Plummer, who reshot all of his scenes in the space of 1 month, which if you ask me is a huge achievement. So how is Christopher Plummer? Well, he is fantastic, of course. This guy is a cinematic legend after all, and it shows in this movie. Though he is great, he's not actually in the movie that much. He's nowhere near in it as much as you think he should be, so he doesn't really stand out to me personally. The standout for me was Michelle Williams. She has become such an established actress over the past couple of years, and I'm so glad because she is phenomenal in this film. She gives one of her greatest performances here, which I absolutely loved. She stole the spotlight every single time. Also, I loved how her character was handled. Typically in a film like this, the role that her character would play would usually sit at home while another male character would do all the work. However, this is not the case, as Michelle Williams is actually more or less the main character in this film and gets deeply involved in all the situations which occur. She has equal screen time, if not more screen time, than Mark Wahlberg, and I think that shows how much faith the writers had in not just the character but Michelle Williams as an actress. Speaking of Marky Mark, he plays yet another character with a name almost as ridiculous as Cade Yeager, Fletcher Chase. Now, Fletcher Chase is an ex-military soldier who now works for Mr. Getty as his private security liaison, as well as being the upfront negotiator for him. This is how his character gets involved. Mark Wahlberg is pretty good in this movie, as he is in most films. I find him to be an extremely reliable actor in almost any role. However, you never really buy the fact that this guy was a ruthless ex-soldier who turned to negotiation tactics after he left, but Mark Wahlberg gave a well-rounded performance on the whole. I don't particularly have any problems with him. I like Mark Wahlberg a lot, so yeah, he was good in this movie. Now, this is one of those more rare occurrences where Ridley Scott directs a non-sci-fi feature film. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Ridley Scott. I think he could deliver some really great direction to films like Alien or The Martian. He does have his own sense of style, but I really don't like how he goes about things sometimes in real life. Some of the things he says, some of the things he spouts about Hollywood, I feel sometimes he needs to shut his mouth. However, in All the Money in the World, you could not tell that this was directed by Ridley Scott. This film's direction is very bland, with not much sense or style to it, which is a real shame. This movie honestly could have been directed by anybody, and I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. This did not feel like a Ridley Scott movie. There were not any kind of impressive or creative shots within this movie. The cinematography was a big letdown. I don't feel that this movie stands out in its direction in any way, shape, or form. This film also has major issues with its script. This is a negotiation-driven film. That means that this film is going to live or die based on how engaging the script is. But this film has a script that just makes you drift off. The writing has no intensity, which means you do not care about what is actually being said, which is a shame. The script is just unentertaining. It does pick up in the second half, but it really does not ever reach the high points it not only should do, but needs to do, in order to keep the audiences interested in this film. Pacing is also a big problem. The first half of this film is extremely boring. I very rarely begin to feel tired when watching movies, but the first half of this film was causing my eyes to drift and I began to fall asleep, which is something that just doesn't happen to me. Now, just like the script, the movie picks up the pace in the second half, but it can never seem to lose all the baggage it picked up in the first half. The film takes a good hour before it actually gets going, which is painful for a film with a runtime of 2 hours and 12 minutes. The film does not gauge your interest eventually, but it's just getting there that's the problem. It does gauge you eventually, you do get there, but it is the getting there that is the problem here. Another thing that annoyed me is that the movie really felt dragged out. I hate it more than most things when a film has a long runtime but does not justify itself to be that long. For example, Blade Runner 2049 is close to 3 hours, but it never wastes a single minute of it. The Wolf of Wall Street is over 3 hours long, and once again uses all of that time perfectly. This film, however, feels like it replays the same scene again and again and again, which makes it seem very repetitive. You can't help but feel as if you're watching the same events play out at multiple different points throughout the movie, and you can't help but think, well, what was the point in that when we haven't actually gotten a different outcome to what we got last time? It's just feeling like we're just wasting time here. And like I said, for a very long movie, that can really just dial down on you, and I really didn't enjoy how this film decided to replay the same scenes just again and again and again with no actual different outcomes. Also, just a side note, this movie does that thing where it says the name of the movie within the script itself. What makes it worse is that this is not an isolated incident. It happens around 3 times where they all say all the money in the world. It's really obnoxious. Sometimes it can work in films, but most of the time, 90% of the time, it never works. It works on paper, but it doesn't work in execution. And especially in a film like this, which is a true story, it really falls flat. And I found it incredibly ridiculous when that single line kept popping up. Overall, All the Money in the World was a bit of a drag. Though the movie had a very strong performance from its cast, it could not save the movie from its unengaging writing, poorly executed story, awful pacing, and dragged out storytelling. This movie is not necessarily bad, it's just incredibly boring and dull, which for some may be worse than a straight up flop. So, did you guys see All the Money in the World? If you did, tell me in the comment section below what you liked, what you didn't. Let's get a discussion going about this movie, and as always, remember, please be respectful. And don't forget to subscribe to The British Critic for more reviews and movie-related videos.